handing out hardware. We are over 1 week removed from the end of the 2024 Major League Rugby season. We got another fantasy MLR year under our belts. Let's talk a little bit about MVPs, busts, and sleepers, plus much more, with a whole flurry of offseason moves already happening. The Fantasy Rucker Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 121 of the Fantasy Rucker Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. With you each and every single week, Matt Yee, Devin, Vanderpool. I am Ryan Yee. And guys, on this episode, we're handing out a little bit of hardware here. We're about a little over a week removed from the 2024 MLR season. It's been quite a time since we played any fantasy MLR since the end of the regular season. So it's time to reflect a little bit on the year that we had and dish out some full season MVP sleepers, busts, like we said at the beginning, compare them to our mid-season rankings that we had. But before we get into it, guys, how's everything? This is 2 weeks in a row that we're all on the show. This is a good groove.
I don't know. I don't.
You know what? Now I'm out next week. I'm just gonna cut it. Yep.
Oh yeah, you would, Vandy. You would.
Listen, I keep you guys on the edge of your toes, right? I show up too much, you get annoyed, then you start not liking me. I show up just enough.
No, I just hate when you show up with a hat on. Why do you show up with a hat on when everybody needs
Wow.
There we go.
I didn't see no hat.
See,
I had a hat on.
that's exactly what the people need.
We love seeing that.
Shave it down a
hairline.
bit, buddy. That looks like way too much hair for you.
Yeah.
See that door? See how it's open this time? I'll put you in there with the last body I just put in. I mean, what?
Oh, what?
Wait, what?
You could try.
There you go. Starting off this episode hot. But yeah, good to see you guys as always. Again, to all our listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in. Got a jam-packed show, like we mentioned, handing out the hardware in this one. But of course, we're in the off season, like literally the beginning of the off season. But it seems like we've had a flurry of news and notes that have come down the wire, the literal trade wire, that we're going to be discussing about in this episode, plus some second and first team announcements, in addition to some other stuff. So we're going to keep you in the know with that. Talk a little bit about fantasy MLR with a tiny update, guys. And then a little bit of Triple D, Devin's Degenerate Dambles, brought to you by Betstamp. But before we get into it, like we say every single episode, if you aren't already, give us a follow at the Fantasy Ruckers. Again, we finished our first season of expanding fantasy MLR to the masses and to the public, and we had a fantastic season. And if you want to be in the know, if you want to get in on the fantasy MLR fun, you'll want to follow us on socials, be first in the know when leagues do open up, when you can sign up, when you can take part, all that good stuff. Like, subscribe, comment goes a long way in supporting this channel. We're keep on approaching on that 100 number. We're hovering around that 100 subscriber number. So let's try to get there this off season. And again, if you aren't in there, we have a good community. Our Fantasy Ruckers community in our Discord, link down below to join that. And hey, check out the fantasyruckers.com while you're at it too. Got all the stats from the past season up there. If you're missing MLR already, you can go there and kind of reminisce on what was a very fun 2024 season.
Only 99,900 till we get that silver play button.
Yeah, honestly, we're just got to keep it slow but surely, right? That's how we got to do. Eventually,
Trust the process.
We may be old and gray.
Wait, do they got a bronze one?
We may what?
Do they got a bronze one or just silver?
No, you go silver right to gold, and then you get old diamond one.
Yeah. So we may all have hairlines like yours, Vandy, by the time we get that silver. But nonetheless,
all right, you know what?
We'll keep. No, don't leave. Don't. No. We love you here. You know the people.
Sorry, what's that? There's a boy stuff. Well, I gotta run, guys.
Yeah, hey, well, anyways, guys, let's get right into this show because again, like we said, had a jam-packed busy week of news that dropped down the wire here over the course of the past 7 days. We'll start off with the announcement by Major League Rugby for our official first, second, and honorable mention 15 squads. You can basically count that third squad or that honorable mention squad as a third squad. Don't know why they do that, but either
I don't know.
way,
They can't count to 3.
yeah, I guess not. But either way, I've got some names on there that you expected to be on there. And I think more importantly, and what a lot of people are talking about, got some names on there that were omitted. That was quite a surprise. But I guess we'll just talk about it. First team here, we'll get into right away. Cameron Orr, Dylan Fawcett, Stephen Longwell there on your front row. Rhino Herbst and Frank Lahore, obviously expected names in that front 5 there. In the back row, a lot of competition there, but Yero Gomez Vara, Corey Daniel, and Semi Kunatani in that back row. Andre Warner at 9, Jason Putros at 10, Taniela Filimone. Vandy, I know you had a very close affinity to him. He had a stellar season in fantasy circles. He comes in there as the inside center first team player this year. Jordan Jackson Hope, Wayne Vanderbank, Michael Manson, or sorry, Filimone as the winger, Jordan Jackson Hope as inside center, Wayne Vanderbank as the outside center, Manson and McDonald there to round out those back 3. But there's your first team for 2024. Thoughts on that team, and just kind of overall things that you think might be missing here.
Not saying Andre Warner's not great. Should have been Connor Tupai.
I mean, yeah, I don't have anything necessarily for the first, second. I have issues with people that were left off the entire thing.
Yeah, sure. And that being one of them. Connor.
Okay, well,
Whatever.
then let's get through it quickly here.
Yeah.
Then Jack Iscaro, Quatrin, Juan Pablo Zeiss on the second team, James Scott, Kyle Bailey, Mason Flesh, McLean Jones, Sam Tuifua to round out the front, the forwards there. Juan D. Oliver, Mac Mason, Julian Dominguez, Dan Creel, Tian Luz, Jade Styling, and Devon Rousseau to round out that second team. And you got honorable mentions: Ezekiel Lindermuth, DeWalt Kotza, Joe Apikotoa, Greg Peterson, Sam Gala, Vili Hilu, Ben Bonasso, Seta Baker, JP Smith, Jason Robertson, Paula Bellicana, Billy Meeks, Junior Goffa, Nate Oxberger, and Davey Kozer. So those are your first, second, and honorable mention 15s, respectively. And then I guess we can go to Maddie. I think that's the conversation that a lot of people are having. There are some names that are missing on this list. I'll start off. Notably, I can't believe Tarangatira Waitokia is not on this list.
Balakana is in the second team, and he had a bad year.
Yeah,
like, let's not pretend like he had a good year. Like, this guy played half the season, and we're not putting on Tarangatira Waitokia from here. Like, that's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I get
Tarangatira Waitokia played on the wing. He played on the wing most of the year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get it.
I mean, Waitokia should be at the very
100%.
least on that second team. I mean, I get it. Jordan Jackson, Home, Wayne Vanderbank, Michael Manson, Filimone.
Look, he doesn't fit on the first. That's fine.
Second row, second team. I mean, Bellicana, to correct, he was an honorable mention, but still.
Sorry. Same thing.
Anyways.
Dominguez, even with Dominguez, Julian Dominguez is out half of the year. Why is he on there?
How is Jason Robertson on there and Joel Hodgson isn't when Jason was getting benched for the next 10?
You know, good point, Vandy. Good point.
All I gotta
Dominguez one baffled me because, I mean, okay, he wasn't out half year, of course. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but like,
as you do,
he did not play as well as Tarangatira Waitokia, nor was as consistent as Tarangatira Waitokia. That doesn't make sense to me. Some other guys, Vandy, you had it right. Tupai, I don't know what he's doing not on there. Yeah. Ronan Murphy, I mean, tough sledding at that back row position, but Ronan Murphy definitely deserved to be on there. Dylan Nell deserved to be on there. Jonah Moe, I don't know how he was left off.
I don't know how
Jonah Moe is so
Jason
good.
Dom in the second row, he should have been on there at some point in that second row. Like, I don't know. I think there's just some guys on here that it's tough. I get it. It is tough, but like, you're putting some guys on here that I like. Dominguez, I don't think. Balakana, I don't think. I think JP Smith probably could have been replaced with Tupai. Like, I just think Tupai has had an unreal year. So yeah, it's a tough one.
So
there's so many guys that played well, but
I'll go down the
list.
left off. I'll go down the list in terms of guys that are in our fantasy from a fantasy performance sense. And this is kind of the interesting conversation because we've always long talked about how we want fantasy MLR to reflect as closely as possible top tier performance in the actual game. So when players play well from a fantasy sense, it reflects a solid game played from a rugby sense as well. So I go down the list here in terms of guys that aren't on the list that were within our top 25, top 50 players here. And you can tell me how many. So you got 15. So what is that? 35 or 45 guys that were named in total between the first, second, honorable mention. So I'll go through our top 45 on guys that aren't there. Vandy, you mentioned Joel Hodgson. He finished off as our second best fly half. He was in our top 10, finishing 7th on the season with 199.5 fantasy points. He's not on this list.
Yeah.
You go to Andrew Coe. Andrew Coe was one of the premier back three players that played this season. He had 7 tries on the year, finishes with 157.8 fantasy points. He's not on the list. I didn't see Santiago Videla. He's not on that list.
Which makes sense.
Miami, he had kind of a late push there towards the tail end of the season. Nick Rigg.
Can you go back to that? Can you go back to that list for a sec there, Ryan?
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, the one thing that I will say is that
I was
our
looking
45,
for Wayne Vanderbank.
our 45 is unrelated to positions, right? So we can have like 40 centers in there and 5 back threes, and we can say, oh, somebody was left off. So obviously there's a difference there, and we totally get that. But regardless, I think out of those names, especially the ones that are at the top, we think of like, okay, why was Tarangatia Waitokia left off of there and Dominguez or Balakena put in there?
Yeah.
Why was guys like, I don't know, Vili Helu put in there, but Jonah Moore and Dylan Nell couldn't even get into the honorable mentions?
Which category is Devon Rousseau in? Is he first team?
He's second team.
He's second, which makes sense.
Yeah,
I mean, 15, like Reese McDonald, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I actually think like arguably, I think Reese McDonald had a great kind of a lot of really big games, but I think Rousseau was
more consistent.
I was hoping for more love for Junior Goffa there too.
He was just awesome. Yeah, Junior Goffa.
He was on the anthem, man, and he still did great. Like
he did really good. He was unreal. I think he should have been second team.
Yeah,
but like,
I think
again,
so too.
That's a tough position to crack.
Yeah, I mean, I think again the biggest snub here is Tarangatia Waitokia.
Yeah.
I don't understand how he's on that list. I would throw Jonah Moe up there as well. I get it that the back row position was hard sledding, like you said, Matt. But again, I think that there are many names on this list. To put it,
But you know the thing about lists is, I feel like, not saying they did it too, but I think a good list is one that you look at and get mad and show people and go, "There's no way." Like, you know, different sport. But
that's what I was just gonna say.
Had that top 100, and the first 50 are like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
And it's all just to get people on that website just to be like, "You're crazy."
Now, what's a little bit different, I guess, in this sense is this is coming from the league. But to your point, Vandy, from a contextual standpoint, this 45 player list was created by, according to their website, was voted on by a group made up of MLR media, referees, and stat specialists. Why aren't we in this group? We should be put in this group to vote. Well, I think we need
a referee. We count as
media.
Hey, what the referee asked?
Why are we not media?
Why the referee not ask the TMO to review the list?
Yeah, there we go. Well, I mean, hey, you go to the TMO, you still get just a bad answer.
Roasted.
Just twice. Yeah. I mean, whatever. I think
I would be interested in seeing a list. I think a list that would be more important for me to see would be the players voting on their peers. Like that would be something that I would want to see. And what would be interesting is how that compares to this list, because obviously as spectators and MLR media,
by the way,
referees and stat specialists, like they're watching it from an outside looking in perspective. Like it would be cool to see how these guys kind of
watch as much as we do.
And I think moving on, I think to like I think they're saying they're announcing the forward back player rookie of the year in the coming week or whatever. I mean, they got to be the forward player and back of the year all got to be in this first team, right? Or else it's not consistent. They have to, right?
Yeah,
so like,
I agree. So okay, then let's play a fun game.
Kunatani, player of the year, Manson.
Okay, let's play. No, let's do that, Maddie. Who are your guesses? So if you had to guess who player of the year is right now,
Manson.
You think it's Manson?
I think so.
For me, it's between.
I think they're going to pick Vanderbank.
I think
they're going to pick Vanderbank.
It's between Manson or Vanderbank for me.
It should be Manson though, but they're going to pick Vanderbank.
Yeah, and I mean,
they're going to give Vanderbank player of the year, Manson back of the year, Kunatani forward of the year, and that's just how they're going to do it. They're not going to give the same guy both.
No, okay, I think we're across the board on that one. I think Vanderbank.
I think you sniped it too. I think you're. They are gonna pick Wade too.
Yeah, but
And rookie of the year has to be a guy who's drafted, right?
well, it should
Ooh,
be, right?
does it?
Or is
Or,
it?
or
Or
is
is
it
it
not?
anybody?
I don't know. I think it
mean,
could be a guy that just
then it's Kunatani.
right. You're right.
I'm pretty sure they have to come through the collegiate draft.
Okay. Which is then weird, right? Then that just adds a whole
Well, then
other
I don't
layer
know.
of stuff.
I'm not
Right,
sure.
it's
I
tough.
forget. I forget who's
Anyways,
been the rookie of the year the past year.
I think
But
they give Wayne Vanderbank the edge because he's on the championship winning team.
And he is
They made
okay.
it to the final
If he
shield.
wins it, it's not egregious. Like he's
No. It's not egregious. It's not egregious if Wayne Vanderbank wins it. Michael Manson, I think, especially from fantasy circles, like us chatting, like what he did, especially in the last 3 weeks, was just like incredible. And the consistency,
it's done.
It's
It was
crazy.
done what he did this year. You can't pick anybody else.
Right.
Also, coach of the year Heineke Meyer, and team of the year. Oh wait, there is no team of the year. Coach of the year Heineke Meyer.
Okay.
Utah biggest hope.
Heineke Meyer wasn't he? I thought Heineke Meyer was the front office guy.
No. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Pote Human. You're right.
Pote Human.
He
Human.
gets coach of the year.
Yeah,
coach of the year.
I'm with
You don't think there? Do you think there's any chance that Dallas Jackals head coach?
He should get coach of the year. Honestly,
is there any chance that Augustin Cavalieri gets?
He should get it. He should get it.
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
did.
for what he's done, but it's coach of the year. It's not coach of the last 3 years. What you've done and turned this team around. It's just like
fair.
I think it's hard to look at a 15-1, 14-1 team and say
it's just like there's that asterisk there because they lost in the friggin' first round.
It's not. These aren't. You can't factor in the playoffs to this.
I don't know. I think they might.
We have no idea.
Yeah, anyways, it's like those awards.
Point being.
Anyways, you know what else is nonsense? Just like these awards, trades.
It's true. It's true. So let's get right into it. I mean, like we said, it's the beginning of the offseason, but I guess the front offices of these teams didn't get the memo because they went right into getting work done. Now, we do have the 2024 MLR draft official date set. We talked about it last week about how they talked about the deadline.
Are they going to this year?
The deadline for the sign up and the for players to declare for the draft. But now they officially have a date set, and it's going to be August 28th at 7 p.m. on the Rugby Network.
And an in and out.
Yeah, at an in and out. We'll see.
You know where real business is done?
Where?
Hooters.
Is that so?
It's
they have good
curly
wings.
Fries. If you can do
good wings, I heard too.
Because neither guy wants to look. And then it's pure. How do you act under pressure?
It's just a whole. You learn the intangibles there of your players.
That's right. I learned who you are.
I see. Mandy, maybe you need to go to the front office of some squad.
Uncanny,
Utah. There's a lot of openings. You can. We're all for it.
Actually, I'll probably get us canceled, but
never been. I'll say I've never been, but I've heard good wings and good curly fries.
No, I'm canceled.
That we're trying to not get to, Vandy. I think if we had a vote out of the 3 people on this show, it'd be you first. That would probably happen.
Easy.
No question.
Easy.
Yeah. I'm glad you understand.
You don't need a degenerate Damble to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. No kidding. But let's talk about some of these trades. A lot of fun stuff. Again, like I mentioned, MLR draft set for August 28th. So a lot of this movement happening ahead of that happening at the end of the month. I guess we'll open up with the trade that involves one of the major picks in this collegiate draft, and Anthem is doing dealings with Los Angeles, and Anthem receiving the 2nd overall pick. So I assume now they have the 1st and 2nd overall picks here. They get cap considerations as well for 2025 in exchange for a international player slot.
I don't understand.
Start calling it Fugazi. Anthem
so they just
25 Fugazi. Utah receives 1 international player.
Well, even then, I mean, I don't even understand because you give away an international player spot because Anthem wasn't going to use them anyways. So they just use these as value to just give it away.
Sure. But I think this works for both parties, right? Like I get it. Like we've always talked on this show about kind of the kind of weird trade value and not really quite understanding that salary cap considerations we've said on the show. I mean, we'll throw that out the window. It's basically like in baseball where they say for future money considerations. It's exactly the same thing. It's just an exchange of cash for a team to kind of have a little bit of help to kind of sign some guys. For Anthem, it helps because this collegiate draft emphasizes the growth and development of local talent. right? So that's what the Anthem is aiming to do, and they're not having that focus on international players anyways. Los Angeles again is a team that doesn't have that restriction or hasn't imposed that self kind of ideology on themselves. So both teams are getting things and giving away things that, help each other out. So I mean, I get it. Anthem's in an advantage because they don't value their international player slots, but you got to pay with what you got. I mean, I would say it's a disadvantage that they're not signing international players in the first place. So, just using what you got. And that's,
I think you got to grow to just learn that this is how it works. Like, I remember,
right.
Ryan, when you when we started watching football together, and I'm like, what do you mean this guy just got cut? Like, that guy was sick and they just cut him. And you're like, hey, they need money.
Yeah.
And I never understood it. And it's just part of it. And now when I go to explain it to people, it doesn't make any sense. This for me is the same. It's like it is what it is.
It's an extra element because we don't see these in other leagues, right? Like, what's an international player slot, right?
They
Like every
open up,
team
it's a
starts with
briefcase.
10.
Salary cap consideration is just money in the bank. That's all it is.
So, Vandy, you alluded it. Anthem in another dealings here, they receive cap considerations in exchange for another international player slot that Utah will gain. So now Anthem heading into 2025 are now down to 8 international slots that they have available to them. Utah and Los Angeles in these trades gaining 1 here. So again, kind of Anthem using that to their advantage. The last trade I think is probably the most interesting outside of maybe the second overall pick is Old Glory DC is receiving the rights to Jason Emery in exchange for salary cap consideration. So Jason Emery, he's been a longtime name of the MLR. Obviously with the New York Ironworkers when they were around, went to Los Angeles last year, had kind of an in and out season. Facing injury in some cases, but then ended up being a pretty stable role with Los Angeles kind of dealing with their fly half issues and lack of depth in that position. But it sounds like Emery is going to Old Glory DC, which is interesting because it's a team that has Jason Robertson, Braden Bowd. I know Emery has center experience as well, but they're pretty locked up with the centers as well with William Talatina and other players.
Emery's not playing for Old Glory DC. That's not. He's either going to be traded to another team or he's not coming back to the MLR. That's my take.
Which is weird. Like, then why? Like,
because
what I mean?
He doesn't. Yeah, but he gets to choose. We know that this is how it works. He can get traded all he wants, but he cannot sign for Old Glory DC and Old Glory DC. It's happened with Quattrin last year or 2 years ago.
Right.
He knew he didn't want to play for Utah, and Utah immediately traded him away to New England Free Jacks. So, like, I think I just don't see
what
why.
A great move.
Like, I just think Emery has too much.
But then why does Old Glory DC do this then? I guess to that note, like why even make this transaction?
The hope it's the same reason why some guys take a chance on.
We got to figure out how the contract
on the draft too.
Do you think conversations happen between the team and Jason Emery before this deal is made, or no? You think they just kind of?
No, they just
probably. I mean, probably. He says look, maybe, and he's like, I'm probably not going to sign here, but you can have my rights.
Is this any indication that there may be a player that maybe Old Glory DC knows about that isn't going to be returning? Maybe Jason Robertson is done in the MLR. I mean, we've seen him, retire from the league before. Is that something that maybe happens? Maybe Graydon Bowd is looking at other opportunities. You look at the centers like William Talatina, Thomas Aboni.
Graydon Bowd isn't going anywhere. If he gets an opportunity, he's sticking with it. Like, I don't. Yeah, it's not like he's going internationally. So I don't know. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. That's my hinge.
Yeah.
Or my hunch.
Your hinge.
My hinge and my hunch. We'll find out later on.
Okay, I guess we'll see. Again, if you're trying to read between the lines and really play conspiracy, that's probably the thing that I lean to most, is that maybe there's something cooking that Old Glory DC knows about that we're just not aware of. A departure of one of those bigger names, like, I would point to Jason Robertson. He's left the league before.
And he'll do it again.
We'll see. All right, time for our favorite part of the show. Any other news and notes before we move on to our next segment, guys?
Did you mention how many international slots each team had?
Yes, 10.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah. So here we go. All right. Well, here it is. Time for a Fantasy Ruckers Leagues update.
Ooh, there's literally no league anymore. Why do we still need an update? I don't understand. What are we updating about? How can we update about fantasy football?
Hear ye,
I
hear
almost
ye.
lost it
Here
that
is
time.
Supreme Commissioner Yi with the Fantasy Ruckers Leagues update. I just want to say, Maddie, I worked really hard on the trumpets and the hear ye, and the
What do you mean
disrespect.
you downloaded an MP4 and
No,
played
no, I don't know what you're talking about. I edited hard. I was an overland. I
pulled
hear
it
ye.
from Game of Thrones? It
There's
was a
no way
clip
that there's
clip
no
from
way.
season 3, episode 4, Game of Thrones.
I promise that's not Homer Simpson saying
What's the
hear
timestamp?
ye. What
We're gonna
with
look it up.
that same?
I'm gonna call
6
Matt on it.
minutes, 9 seconds.
There we go.
Yeah, no, I promise it's not Homer Simpson saying hear ye that I pulled from an episode that overlaid it with some music. I promise not that.
Yeah.
I really did work very
Yeah.
hard on it.
See, there you go.
But nonetheless, a couple things to update, Maddie. There are some updates here. The first one is that we alluded to it last week, but the feedback questionnaire is out this week. We are going to be sending out a link. It'll be a Google form for people to fill out, both within the community, even if you weren't in a league, or if you were in a league, even more helpful. But just for us to get your feedback on kind of how your experience was playing fantasy MLR in your first year, things that we could add, things that we can change, from both a playing perspective and just from a content perspective. What are you guys looking for? What do you guys want us to create for you guys? What would you be interested in? There's going to be a whole bunch of different questions like that. Additional analytics, merchandise, maybe, maybe starting up some paid leagues, that people can kind of wager in on that. A whole bunch of stuff that we're looking at, in addition to the nuanced stuff like rules and points and things like that. So keep an eye out for that link. It will be out this week, if not already. And have a look at the questionnaire, fill it out. It does us a whole bunch of help to help you guys get a better and the best experience that you can get as we continue to grow this thing and make it the best it can possibly be. The last update is it's still a Fantasy Ruckers League, technically. It's called it. I know that on Sleeper, the fantasy platform that is preferred by us here on the Fantasy Ruckers show for fantasy football, it's called the Fantasy Ruckers Gridiron League. And there is an invite for anyone who is interested in continuing the fantasy, the fantasy feeling here through the NFL season. Vandy, myself, Maddie have been longtime fantasy football players. It's a large portion of what has stemmed our passion for creating fantasy MLR. It all really started with fantasy football. So if you're interested in kind of partaking and taking, duking it out amongst our rugby community in a different sport that is the NFL, you have an opportunity to do that. I know there's like 5 spots left, at least from the time of the recording of this podcast. So hop on it. Should be a lot of fun. It's actually going to be a keeper league. So a 2-player keeper. There's some rules in there. I know that there are some people in our league that haven't ever played fantasy football. I know Stephen Lowen, our community moderator, and it's a keeper, so it should be interesting. We were getting a little bit of flack there in the group chat. It is going to be Vandy and myself co-commissioning the official Fantasy Ruckers League that we're going to take the people on. They were thinking that we were going to submit each individual teams, but I told them for too long we've been butting heads and been duking out. It's time for us to get on the same team and take on these fools that are the Fantasy Ruckers community. Let's
and I'm
really
in 7 other football leagues.
It's true. I'm in like 5 fantasy football.
It's disgusting. Just like, it's degenerate.
It's great. It is degenerate. We love fantasy sports that much.
I'm in doing this.
I know, it's crazy. I'm in 5 fantasy football leagues. I'm in a dynasty fantasy baseball league. I'm in a keeper fantasy basketball league. I'm in a fantasy hockey league. I've created fantasy MLR. I used to dabble in fantasy Premier League. It really just never ending.
I created it. You facilitate it.
Right. There you go. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that questionnaire. Join that fantasy football league, the Fantasy Ruckers Gridiron League. It's commissioned by our very own analytics guy, Nick Johnson. He's been taking a stranglehold of that. I know he's very passionate about fantasy football, so should be a lot of fun. As soon as we finalize that league, we'll get a draft date set, and we'll have a little bit of fun here during the offseason with some fantasy football. All right, you ready, guys, to get into the main portion of the show here? Talk a little bit about full season MVPs, sleepers, and busts.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's get right into it. Let's do a little bit of a recap, though, and let's take a little bit of a journey and a reflective trip back to halfway through the season, right? We did an episode midway through where we gave out our mid-season MVP awards, our biggest sleepers halfway through the season, and biggest busts. So let's take it through so that people have a little bit of context of what the midway year was like. We'll start off at the top. it was consensus this guy was electric, pun not intended. Reese Lightning, Reese McDonald, the New England Free Jacks was just absolutely tearing it up halfway through the season. I believe this was the time when Maddie and I had our book at bets about Reese McDonald finishing off as the best back three player in the league. That ultimately did not end up happening. But we'll get into the full season portion. But Reese McDonald was our consensus MVP at the time, halfway through the season. Going through the biggest sleepers, Maddie, you had Michael Manson. Pretty good. I had Vaughan Isaacs, which ended up being kind of a not so good pick at this point after he sustained that season-ending injury. And then Vandy, you had Jade Styling there as your biggest sleeper. And then our biggest bust, Maddie, you went with Gideon Van Vyk. Vandy went with Christian Poitevin. I had JP Duplessis on that list. So, 8 weeks later, we're done the full season from a fantasy perspective. We've had time to reflect on the year that was 2024. Has any of that changed? And do we have guys that have kind of creeped in here to be your brand new MVPs, your sleepers, your busts? So let's start off with our MVPs here. And you know what? I'll get my pick out of the way here because I think it's the cop-out pick. It's very easy, but someone had to mention this guy because he was absolutely incredible. He was going to either fall into two categories for me, and that was either sleeper that Maddie had mentioned midway through the point, or this category, and that is the MVP, and that is Michael Manson, which you could probably think. He finished off as our best fantasy player overall in 2024, 242.1 fantasy points, beating Tarangatira Waitokia, the second overall fantasy player, by nearly 30 fantasy points. He finished off the year just incredible. From week 14 onwards, a majority of that second half, even though Maddie had him already as the biggest sleeper, 14.2, 21.5, 20.6, 38.3 with 4 tries in that week 17 match, and then 15.9 in round 18. I mean, I don't want to go on and on and on about this guy because I think it's self-explanatory, but Michael Manson, I think, is the consensus most valuable player, especially what he did in the fantasy playoffs and how he basically took home champion titles for a lot of players here.
Yeah, I mean, hard to argue with that one. Top of the fantasy scoring tables. And like you said, he was either going here or he was going into sleeper. Only reason I personally didn't put him there was because I put him in a different category. But
once you go into Maddie, your MVP.
We'll get to that. But my MVP, I think, just has to be the one and only Semi Kunatani. I mean, to finish top 3 in the entire MLR for fantasy is ridiculous. As a back rower, even more ridiculous. I mean, this was one of the seasons I was like Riker having trombolone sandwich needles in the cheeks type year. It was just absolutely ridiculous by him. Like, and he did it while getting like 3 yellows on the year, like averaging out at least 15 points every game.
Off the bench, ridiculous. 4 of his games too.
Yeah. Well, it was just like, it was hard to just not pick this guy and look at him and be like, he was the MVP. He was in his position.
Right. And I think that's the big point.
Yeah. He had over. The next guy was Frank Lockhor, and let's not even include him because he was technically a second row. So let's go Sam Tuifua.
Yeah.
The next guy, 154 points. Semi Kunatani had 214.1 fantasy points.
Yeah, ridiculous.
He beat the field by 50, over 50 points. Like that is just ridiculous. And I looked at him, I was like, this is a no-brainer. I gotta go Semi Kunatani.
So it's funny too, because he starts off right after our midseason awards, starting off the bench. Right. So like, you're like, okay, like Semi's not really going to do it. And then he goes out off the bench in both the games that he started off the bench in that second half, 2 tries each, 4 tries in 2 games coming off the bench, and then just goes on a tear. Right. So 17.1, 17.9 in those matches, and then 18.3, 13.6, 12.3, 18.7, 13.7. Just the level of consistency from essentially round 3 onwards is just remarkable. Like Semi Kunatani is going to be unquestionably, if he's back in the MLR this upcoming season, like he will be a top 5 pick. There's no doubt about it.
And then he'll bust.
Yeah, no kidding.
He's too big.
All right. Vandy, your MVP for the 2024 year.
Mine was Jason Potros. You know what? Ever since I've been playing the sport, I've always honed in kind of on one position. It's always been the fly half for me. I don't know why. I feel like in fantasy, it's kind of like the quarterback. If you play football, it's just a position. It's nice to just have that guy and have a guy that every week. And then especially on top of that, you got a guy like Patros who week in, week out is just putting up numbers. He's heavily involved in the team, veteran presidentship, really no guy behind him, never got out of the 10 position, pretty much played every game. He got banged up, I think, after week 10 for like a week or two. And then other than that, I mean, and he still scored. What was he in fantasy? He was fourth. And he missed a couple games.
Yeah. And
realistically, one more game he beats Kunatani. He ends up top 3.
Yeah.
I mean, points.
I think that's what's interesting, right, with our MVP picks is that there is something to be said about the positional value, right? Like, it's very easy to say Michael Manson because he was the best fantasy player. But again, that difference between a varying number of back 3 players doesn't have as big of a discrepancy as the positions that you guys had mentioned, right? Very nice to have Michael Manson. I think what he did was off the charts, which is why I had to say him. But the advantage and the value in the name MVP, right, speaks for itself, of having a Semi Kunatani that gets 50 fantasy points more than any other back row player in the entire fantasy competition. And then to your point, Vanny, Jason Patros, who I think Joel Hodgson was like probably
he only
the
beat Joel by 10, but I think
the next guy, right, is Davey Kutzer, who didn't even play fly half for a lot of those games. So you're beating, right? Joel Hodgson has been kind of that staple in fantasy circles for a long time, but like Jason Patros, even with a missed game, beats Davey Kutzer by almost 40 points. So again, my point being that the value of having these guys that are just in a tier of their own, you can't even just look at total fantasy points scored and compare it to Michael Manson, because again, we've mentioned it on the show before. It's like the value when you're facing your team, you have to compare the kind of point discrepancies there. And when you have an advantage at back row, at fly half, at the center position, these positions that are a lot second row, these positions that don't have a lot of guys that produce a lot of points, it's almost more valuable than having a Michael Manson per se. On a weekly basis. Couldn't agree more. But let's get into, I guess, our biggest sleeper. So, Maddie, I'll kind of let you get this quickly out of the way to start off with. I already talked about him.
Yeah, already teased it. Hard to put him here. I'm being consistent between my half year sleeper, your miss year sleeper. Still Michael Manson. Ended up top of the year. Didn't get drafted. I called it in our top 5 segment before the year started that he was going to be a guy to watch. He was a guy to watch, and he was a guy you wanted. Michael Manson, definitely the sleeper of the year, the ultimate sleeper of the year.
Picked in the latter rounds, and ends up being he was essentially last year's Joe Mono. And it was just incredible to see what he did. For me, I got to go with Wayne Vanderbank as my sleeper of the year. Finishes off as the 6th best fantasy player. And the reason why I say Wayne Vanderbank is because all the chatter was about the return of Leroux Milan. And maybe if there was a little bit more foresight about kind of what Leroux Milan went through in terms of his injury, and kind of maybe seeing the opportunity that a guy like Wayne Vanderbank would have, a lot of people would point towards Ben Lesage, maybe stepping in and kind of being that enforced piece that could have done that. But Wayne Vanderbank really wasn't on anybody's radars, getting picked in the mid to latter rounds of our drafts just because of the hype of the other centers in that position. But he ends up being the guy that comes up at top. And when you're able to pick the center position, the best center in outside of Devon Rousseau, who you could argue played more of his games at the back 3 position. Wayne Vanderbank was the guy, and he was a consistent point scorer that you were getting in the middle to late rounds. A lot of value there.
And I think nobody could have guessed that out of the 3, Wayne Vanderbank was a guy that was just going to go off this year. Like whatever, Leroux Milan, Ben Lesage, opportunities, doesn't matter, because Wayne Vanderbank came out and had a year. Like, you could put him at 12, you could put him at 13. Leroux Milan could have been in there. Ben Lesage could have been in there. Wayne Vanderbank made the most of every carry that he got, and you saw that every game.
Absolutely. All right, Vandy, for you, your sleeper of 2024.
My sleeper was actually a guy I happen to have too. It's Philemone. I mean, the guy was an absolute stud.
Try scoring machine.
I think he scored the most tries in the league, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was tied with Fawcett or something like that.
Yeah, I think they accounted for playoffs too. But anyways, no, Philemone, he was an absolute stud. I got him off the waivers, and I mean, same kind of similar thing with him. I did not think he would be kind of their best back 3 option. Guys like even Fidel being there was terrifying. Yeah. I remember Philemone there the year before, I believe. And he kind of got hidden behind guys like Jordan Jackson Hope, JP Duplessis, things like that. But you know what? He had an absolute killer season, 187 points, most on NOLA by quite a bit. And I mean, where did he end up in the league? I think
he was ninth overall.
Yeah. So I mean, top 10 guy. Yeah, I mean, when you pick up a guy like that off waivers, a top 10 pick,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a steal, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah. 11 tries in that regular season this past year. Again, Taniela Filmoni, very solid pick. So just changing. So Matt stays consistent, goes with Michael Manson. I went from Vogan Isaacs, obviously, due to that injury, to Wayne Vanderbank and Vandy, from Jade Styling to Taniela Filmoni.
Yeah, good thing. I could have been more wrong about Styling. I think I literally picked him, and then he kind of just fell off the face.
I mean, but he did perform towards the end of the playoff, in the regular season.
It wasn't like the first.
It wasn't
right,
no.
And it was just
he had that game in the playoffs where he had 36 points, a 4-try game. But before that, basically when I picked him was probably week 5 or 6. He didn't score another try to week 15.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, the Seattle back three was very hard to predict in terms of guys coming in and out. Tony Pulu, Devon Rousseau,
Dan Crew.
Guys just kind of being
Inafuti.
All right.
So, I was just going to lead it off because talk about consistency. We're talking about my consistency with Manson. I'm going to keep it more consistent with my last biggest bust of the year. I'm going to the same one. And the guy that I drafted, I think in the second round or the third round, I forget. But Gideon Van Vyk, you get another award. You get the half season award. You get the full season award. He hardly played this year. When he did play, he looked like he wasn't game fit. When he did play, I think he got maybe one try, but really didn't put up the Gideon Van Vyk numbers. This is a guy that we had in the top 5, top 3 back rowers in the past 2 seasons. He just wasn't it. He just didn't have it. Young man just didn't have a year. Not sure why he was out of the lineup. Not sure why. He was in the lineup for the Houston SaberCats playoff run of 1 game. Suck it. Of 1 game. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what happens to him, but he was definitely one of the biggest busts of the year, probably in our league and definitely in every other league as well.
Yeah. A lot of hype with Gideon Van Vyk heading into this year, and definitely not living up to that standard and that hype. For me, I'm going to go with Joe Mono.
Talk about hype.
And
talk about hype, eh?
It's tough, right? Because I hate picking guys, especially in this bust category, when there's injury involved, because you can't predict injury, right? But
it plays a factor.
How do you not include him in this category when he comes off a season where he scored the most tries? I believe it was 14 or something like that. It was something ridiculous.
Something crazy.
Was hands down, almost like, again, this year's Michael Manson was just hands down the 2023 Fantasy Player of the Year. And he comes to this season, starts off with injury, getting injured in that preseason match, doesn't appear until round 4. I already knew the heartbreak. We've seen this story before, right, Vandy? In other fantasy sports, where a guy gets injured in preseason. You know what I mean? And you already had your draft and you picked it. It's written on the wall in terms of what's going to happen. And it kind of happened with Joe Mono. You had 3 double-digit fantasy point performances from him in the 10 weeks that he played. But it's you didn't get what you drafted first overall for.
Well, I would say in the way we do this fantasy league, the first pick is the double-edged sword, it seems. It is awesome. You have your pick of the lot. You can have anyone, but you're also kept to this results of last year. And you can only base your draft off of results from last year.
Right.
There's a few other factors, of course, that weigh in, but basically you see numbers like that. You're forced to pick him because then you live with, I could have had him. You're picking 8th. You never really had a shot at Joe.
Right.
So
the decision's being made for you to a sense, right? Because you can always cop out.
It's forced.
Right. You can cop out and be you know what I mean? I had to pick the guy that I picked, even if he was a bust, right? Yep. No, that makes sense. I think to kind of wrap up this pick is that I think in every single year that we've done fantasy MLR, the first overall pick has never lived up to
That's what
expectations.
I mean. It's a double-edged sword. It's never worked out. But the time that first pick reaches for someone, that guy from last year, next year, you don't take Michael Manson, he's going to be a dog next year. If they take him,
Yep.
buddy,
Right.
thanks for the one good year.
Now, I will say we're increasing the number of numbers that are available to us. So as we continue to kind of do this thing, like again, just that body of work grows and grows and grows.
Yep.
And again, it's always going to be based on sample size, and that sample size that we're offering fantasy league members is growing and growing. So we'll see. But again, it's hard because in the MLR, you have guys that just come in the league like Michael Manson, who's only had one season in the year and dominated. Can he do that again? That'll be the big question, right? There's always that volatility that seems ever more emphasized in fantasy MLR, which keeps it fun and different than other fantasy sports than what you experience in, let's say, your fantasy footballs, or your fantasy basketballs or baseballs. Vandy, why don't you wrap up this segment with your biggest bust of 2024?
Well, I mean, I could have probably just stuck with Christian Poitevin, but I went with LaRue Milan. And for this one, once again, it's tough putting these guys from injuries, but in that he did play, I believe it was 10 games. So for me, it does enough where it's like the sample size he gave, he never showed you the reason that you drafted LaRue Milan.
Yeah.
He didn't score a try until the last game. The Shield final was his first try. Hell of a try. Beautiful try. One you were looking for all year. But that's the thing. A hot pick. Well, and not even that.
And the playoff final doesn't count toward fantasy, so it's not even considered.
It basically doesn't matter.
His highest point total this year was 10.4 in, I want to say, round.
But I would say,
I don't think that's right. Round 16.
The reason it was a killer is you always want to play your best guys. They always say, it's a fantasy term, you always hear, start your studs. And it's very common to think this guy, you know LaRue Milan, you know what he's capable of. You see he's healthy, you see he's in the starting lineup, you're gonna play him. And when you did that, when he was in the starting, you were looking at about an average of 6.
Yeah.
He came off the bench. Sure, you're not going to obviously play him when he's putting up those numbers, but the games he gave you hope started like 8 of those 10. Every single time you're doing that thing where if I bench him, he's sick. If I play him, I get nothing.
Right.
And that to me is the worst thing in football or in fantasy. It is the fact that I have to play this guy. You feel like you're forced to, and he's going to do nothing for you.
Right. And I think that's where the bust kind of description fits with LaRue Milan, right? Like his draft value already plummeted a little bit because he was coming off of that injury. So like, for example, like I drafted him and I thought at the time I had pretty good value from him. Yep. I forget what round, but it was in like
I remember we all thought it was a great pick. Like the whole league.
To your point, Vandy, you're waiting, right, for him to have this big breakout game, and you didn't want to miss out on the breakout game. But the longer that you kind of just had that hope, it killed you more and more, right? Like you were so excited when he returned in round 6. You're like, I'm starting him. Gives you 2.4. Probably costed you a fantasy
and
MLR.
Started the game and gave you 70 minutes.
Round 7, 3.2, right? And then that's when you're starting to teeter. If you've kept him in, right? So 2.4, 3.2, 4, you're waiting for it, and you're like, okay, I'll start him one more week. He plays in round 10, he gives you 8.2. And you're like, okay.
Good enough. Finally,
good enough. I'm gonna maybe start him the following week, and then he's on the bench, so you probably didn't play him there. But in round 13, 2.8, like it just never came.
Nope.
And it was just so difficult. So I couldn't agree more, Vandy. From that sense, that's the worst position to be in fantasy. And unfortunately, that's what happened to LaRue Milan this year. Again, excellent player.
Yeah.
Incredible story with that return from injury, but just never lived up to expectation, even for a couple games. From what we saw from LaRue Milan last season in 2023 to what we saw this year in 2024. But yeah, again, to go over it, MVPs this year for Maddie, Semi Quintani for Vandy, Jason Putros, myself, Michael Manson. Our sleepers, Maddie goes with Manson. I went with Wayne Vanderbank. Vandy went with Taniela Filamone. And then our bus of the year, Gideon Van Vyk for Maddie, Joe Mono for myself, and LaRue Milan for Vandy. Now, the biggest part of it is I'm a man of the people. I'm a man of the people. So don't let us dictate here on the Fantasy Rocker Show who MVP is and who the biggest sleeper is and the biggest bust. We want to hear from you. So we're holding our inaugural, and this is going to be an annual thing now at this point in the year, our TFR People's Awards. And a vote will be held in addition to our questionnaire that'll be coming out. We're going to release another Google form about nominees, different categories, and it's going to extend beyond just MVP, sleeper, and bust. We're going to release it to the people. Our fantasy league members are going to vote, and then in a few weeks' time here, we are going to have that awards ceremony, the first ever TFR People's Award. So make sure you keep an eye out on socials for when that vote comes out, and should be a little fun of what the people think. Do the people think what we think here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show?
Hey.
Why
not?
Yeah, let's get the people and let's hear how wrong they are.
Make sure you guys dress up for that episode, right? I want full tuxes. It's a black tie event.
You think I ordered
the only person that comes dressed appropriately to these shows?
Yeah, buddy. I don't have pants on.
Hey, this is the TFR.
Pants
That's
on?
True.
I walk around pretty naked.
Hey, if there's one evening of the year for you guys to look your most dapper,
yeah, you're gonna buy me one?
To be the TFR People's Awards.
You buy me a tux, bro?
Put on a tie, put on a bow tie.
I'll put you a t-shirt.
That would be funny. That would be.
I'll take that.
That would be very funny.
That'd be very me. That'd be very fitting.
But anyways, keep an eye out on socials. TFR People's Awards, the first ever, coming up here in a few weeks. Vote will be held. We'd love to hear from you and who you think should be this year's first ever TFR People's Award winners. All right, let's wrap up the show here with our last segment here. Devin's Degenerate Dambles, brought to you by Betstamp, betting made easy. We partnered with Betstamp to come in here with the Devin's Degenerate Dambles as we navigate the. What are you doing, Vandy?
My hand disappears. It goes so fast.
I swear sometimes I think you have like.
Say it.
He's just doing that.
I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it.
He's just doing the helicopter, you know?
Yeah.
Listen,
it amazes me.
Just say
it. No revolution with the real helicopter.
You know what I'm showing here? I'm on it somewhere.
Oh my God. It amazes me. It amazes me. This guy is a father of two.
Oh yeah. Just wait.
Sometimes I pray for Louis and now Peyton.
Kids are gonna have
fun. Laura deserves a lot more credit.
She does.
A lot more credit.
She does.
Your fiance. Anyways,
but she ain't gonna get it, but she deserves it.
Devin's Degenerate Dambles, brought to you by Betstamp. Betstamp, betting made easy. We've partnered with Betstamp to bring our league members, our community members, the best available deals when it comes to sports books, first time betting deals. We have a link down below, signupexpert.com/thefantasyruckers. And as we navigate the MLR wagering scene, we want our viewers to take that journey with us, and you can discover some sports books that are curated in your area through our link. And we mentioned it last episode, guys, about our challenge that Vandy and I are going head to head.
Not much
when it comes to betting in rugby. And we've talked about the journey that Vandy has had in learning MLR through fantasy. We want him to learn more about the world of rugby, whether it's Rugby Championship, Six Nations, URC. We'll even go as deep as NPC Bunnings and Curry Cup, which we found out this past week.
Hammering NPC this weekend.
We are going to make Vandy a aficionado when it comes to competitions around the world. And we're going to do that through betting. We already know he's a degenerate when it comes to Dambles. He's going to become a degenerate when it comes to rugby with how much he is going to be putting stake into this. So again, to go over the challenge rules, $50 that Vandy and I are going to start with. We have to make a minimum of one bet per week, a maximum of 3. And we're going to see who is going to be able to make the most amount of money this offseason when it comes to all things non-MLR betting, or who runs out of money first. The very rule that I'm going to change, though, is that we said that we were going to just use DraftKings. We're going to keep a tally of kind of the money in our winnings. I'm going to open it up. You can use any sports book you'd like that's available. And to kind of
Now, make sure you mention the caveat. So basically, the way it's going to work too is we're both going to have to announce our drafts before the game, or our picks before the games are played. So what we're going to do is this coming Saturday, our show will be released before those games, to keep it honest. So we can't lie to each other.
I will be creating a graphic that has my picks and your picks that will be released well before these games are taking place, so that we it locks in.
We cannot lie.
We cannot lie. It's all transparent. I mean, again, you can choose any sports book kind of to reflect what we are doing with Betstamp, with signupexpert.com/thefantasyruckers. Find your best deals, find your best odds, use those deals, those first-time bettors deals to get involved. It should be a lot of fun. This week will be our first week. We could have started last week. We talked about it on last week's show, how there were some kind of crazy odds. We talked about some NPC Bunnings odds. We talked about the odds that were against Argentina in the first week of rugby championship matches. We were hesitant to even go close to that match, but Argentina ended up coming out with the big upset, which would have made you a whole lot of money if you had went with that. I believe they were like plus 800 plus underdogs 650. Or plus 650 underdogs with that. So it should be interesting.
I hovered $2 on it, but I knew it was going to count, so I was like, I'm not doing it.
So we'll see. So again, $50. We're not going to announce it yet, but we will announce it in that graphic. But let's go through some options that we have here to make us a little bit of money here in this challenge. I will get it out of the way. There's a whole lot of futures bets that are available at this point in time on a wide range of sportsbooks. So Vandy, if you want to play the long-term game and just have something in there to lock yourself in, so even if you run out of money, you have one bet to hinge on that will kind of win you on top. You got the
don't know how many times I've done that in real life.
There you go. The Premiership, Six Nations, URC, the Rugby Championship. I know that already started, but you can pick who's going to win it here to start, which should be interesting. Those are some futures plays that we have on there. You can go on the odds there and find that out. But we want to talk about some games that are happening this weekend that we may be kind of considering here. So NPC Bunnings is something that we are going to learn about a lot. I had known nothing about NPC Bunnings. Maddie has been our kind of NPC Bunnings aficionado here. Again, a lot of Major League Rugby players obviously go to New Zealand to play in the NPC Bunnings during the offseason. So it'll be fun to kind of dabble in this league. A whole bunch and a full slate of matches this week. We'll probably not be able to catch the Wednesday match between the Bay of Plenty and Counties Manukau. But Maddie, you're kind of that neutral party here. Is there any that Vanny and I should be looking out here?
Yeah.
Or any questions that you want to know?
I got you. Do you know what the spread is for Argentina, New Zealand?
I'm talking about NPC Bunnings.
I know, but I just want to know.
Okay, we'll get into that because I want to talk about Rugby Championship.
Okay. So I got Auckland over Otago.
Okay, so Auckland is minus 385 favorite. So you're gonna have to bet
285.
You got 285. Okay, I got minus 385.
I would parlay these. Like you got to parlay them to get a good value. So I'd go Auckland over Otago.
Okay, and just quick note. I will say that's also the advantage of looking at different sports books and signing up for the variety of sports books through our link on Betstamp is that you can find better odds. So on DraftKings, Auckland is favored at minus 285. However, Auckland is favored minus 385 on Bet Rivers that I have here in Pennsylvania. So kind of playing that, and you should see. But continue, Matt.
Auckland, Otago.
Okay.
Auckland over Otago. Northland over Manawatu.
Vandy's busy writing this down. Yeah.
All right. Hawke's Bay over Southland.
All right. I'm literally like putting these in right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait,
Hawke's Bay over Southland.
Yep.
Okay.
Waikato over Counties Manukau. Everything else stay away from.
Okay. I don't think I have.
Wait, what about Bay of Plenty?
We'll probably not get that one in because it's Wednesday.
Oh.
So I think unless you want to place it down, you can place it down.
If you want to go, I would go Bay of Plenty in that one. If you want to go for one Bay of Plenty.
Auckland's Friday.
Oh, you're right.
But yeah, I would go for those ones. Those are the ones that I'm feeling pretty comfortable with.
Okay. And then I guess the question is then moving on. By the way,
but do they have prop bets?
Do they have what do you mean?
Like, do they have player bets?
Let me see. On Bet Rivers.
They do, yeah. Wow. Very minimal.
Can you bet on tries?
No, but you can bet a lot on future wins.
Yes, you can. Any back. Yeah, I got some here on Bet Rivers.
Are they have names or they have?
No. So there's like, for example, I'm looking at the Wellington Taranaki game.
Yeah, any back score?
Any back scores is minus 143.
Yeah, add that one. Taranaki back scores. Kinina Hollow is sure in for a try.
Okay, I'm putting that down. He's minus 143
on Taranaki though.
Bet Rivers has it. That's why you gotta check your sports books. Bet Rivers has it.
Just put that in there. Just put that in there. Add that to your parlay because you're gonna want that for like Kinina Hollow is an absolute weapon.
Okay. All right. That's
All
good
right.
to know. All right. Let's shift on now over to the rugby championship because obviously we
I'll
have
beat
matches
you and
this
your
weekend. New Zealand is taking on Argentina once again.
Where?
Where?
They're in Auckland, Ryan.
Are they in Auckland again? Okay.
I'm gonna look it up.
Okay. Well, New Zealand is minus 770 favorites. Argentina coming in as 450 dogs. That's definitely teetered a little bit since last week when I think New Zealand was like 1,100 favorites.
Can I get spread, please?
The spread is 14.5 points.
Man, I need some picks from you, and we don't involve your brother.
Yeah, we can figure that one out.
That's what's gonna be funny. It's like we're gonna be outsourcing. I'll be talking Maddie. It's end up's gonna be Maddie versus Maddie, and he's gonna dictate who wins and doesn't win money.
That's right.
Anyways, 14 and a half points is the spread
Hammer the spread
in favor of New Zealand.
Nope, Argentina.
So you think Argentina will lose less than 14 and a half points or win?
Or win.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then you have what's it called? Australia, South Africa taking place Saturday as well. Australia is 475 underdogs.
Eden Park though. Oh.
14 and a half points is the spread as well in this one.
Yeah, I would take South Africa. They're in Australia. Actually, I don't care. I would take South Africa for that one.
They're going to beat Australia by.
I mean, if it's even worth it, I don't know what the odds are on that spread, but they're gonna like South Africa's gonna, they're gonna wagon this thing.
All right,
they're gonna absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't even take it. It's just, I don't even think the odds are probably worth it.
Well, it's minus 114 for the spread.
Okay, throw that one, mix it in with Argentina, the spread. That one's kind of a risk. What's the odds on that one, the spread?
Minus 114 as well.
What's the other way?
Both of them are all minus 114.
Yeah, they keep the spreads the same.
Might wanna hammer that one for both of them. The only
it's a good thing. It's a good thing that Maddie is not in this.
The only thing I'm worried about is New Zealand is at Eden Park, and when the All Blacks play at Eden Park, they're scary.
But you mentioned it though that there's no way that New Zealand loses twice.
They won't lose twice. They won't lose twice. Can I see Argentina? Argentina is a different team this year. They're playing differently. They have different, and I think All Blacks are going to adjust. I think Argentina is still Argentina, and they'll be able to keep up.
Okay,
but it's Eden Park,
Vandy, final rule that I want to get clarified here: does a parlay count as just one bet? Or does a parlay, if you make 3 picks within the parlay, does that fulfill the 3 maximum? I'm saying parlay is probably just one bet, right?
Oh yeah. Just
want to make sure.
One bet.
Okay.
All right. Well, 3 different parlays. You guys are going to be losing quick.
We got a whole bunch in store for us this week. We are going to hit the books, literally and figuratively, when it comes to NPC Bunnings.
I do my best betting
and
hungover.
the rugby championship. There you go. So, what did we say the deadline is?
More clarity than I've ever had.
The graphic, let's say, will come out. So the Friday, let's say the graphic comes out on Thursday.
Okay.
We'll see when DraftKings releases their odds. I know on DraftKings.
Here's what we'll do. We'll definitely get them in every time by Thursday, or the lines come out Thursday.
I don't know. So that's what we're gonna have to play by ear.
We're gonna do it mostly weekend games. So we'll just do Friday. You tweet out the picks.
Okay. If it changes from that, we pick a game that's earlier, either
you gotta say it on the show.
The graphic will be out before those first picks. The game happens. If that includes it. If the graphic's out after, then we don't have it. But again, $50 on the line. We'll see who is able to last the total off season. Maddie has been some pretty good help here. But again, if you want to join in on the fun and join in on our $50 challenge here as we explore the world that is rugby betting, check out our link down below, signupexpert.com/thefantasyruckers. You can find the sports books that are available in your state or province, get some good first-time betting deals, and take advantage of some good value and support the show in return. It really does help us out. All right. Had a jam-packed show for our first off-season show, like official off-season show where we digest the final and everything, and we're kind of removed from the season. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
I think we'll have something to talk about until after the draft.
Yeah. So again,
how ridiculous the draft is.
Questionnaire is out, and you will be a great help filling that out. Fantasy Football League. If you want to join that, will be good as well. We also will have our TFR People's Awards voting coming out as well. We are off next week. We will not be having a Fantasy Ruckers show next week, but we will be back the week after. We're going to continue to get you guys good special guest interviews, continue to talk about rankings and all that good stuff this offseason. You want to stay tuned. Follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers. It's going to be a fun offseason, and we'll be counting down the days to 2025 Major League Rugby. That's for sure. Anything else for the people, Vandy and Maddie?
Nope.
I got nothing. Nothing. Just be a degenerate like Vandy.
All right. For Maddie, for Devin, Vandy, Vanderpool, I am Ryan Yee. We'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Omaha.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.